Hey, what's up guys? It's Yeti here. Welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about whether or not it is time for Classic Plus to finally come out and what's going on with Classic, what's going on with SOD, and I just want to talk about, my theory on these trends and basically where both the community and Blizzard are probably heading next. So for the sake of editing and also the viewers' enjoyment of this video, I have decided to split it up into different sections. I'll try to use transitions and titles on screen and probably YouTube timestamps as well to make the video feel a little bit more organized and more logical, because there were so many thoughts that went into this video and so many bullet points and different ideas, and I was kind of jumping left and right a little bit, and I'll try to make it as logical of a flow with editing as possible. So yeah, thank you guys. So before we get into the video, I want to look at the population of both World of Warcraft Season of Discovery, which came out in 2023 in December, and at Classic, which started with Vanilla Classic back in 2019, and we are currently in Cataclysm Classic, which started a couple of months ago in 2024. And the trend overall has been in decline for a very long time now, and it's pretty obvious, right? Classic is now an old concept, and a lot of players have already played through this even multiple times thus far. Cataclysm is not really Classic anymore. There are so many reasons why the trend is kind of negative right now at this moment. Of course, these are not the only people that are playing the game. These are amount of characters that are entering raids that are being logged in Warcraft logs. So this is going to be the vast majority of raids. But this does not include people that are only doing dungeons, that are only playing the game, and it also does not include people in the Asian servers. As we know right now, China is in Wrath of the Lich King for the first time ever. Back in 2008, or whenever Wrath came out, they had no access to World of Warcraft, and when we had Wrath Classic, there was also the contract with Chinese like internet provider or whatever did not allow them to play. So right now, the highest amount of players are actually on the Chinese servers playing Wrath of the Lich King Classic. On one hand, we have Cataclysm Classic going towards potentially MOP, which a lot of us have played. It's not really the oldest expansion anymore, and we have SOD moving towards who knows what phase, probably Nextramus again. This is all level 60 content. The raids are pretty much just Season of Mastery versions of the raids, which a lot of people have already played through, which is why there's a lot of interest dropping in both normal and hardcore raiding. I still think that Phase 4 and Phase 5 are the best phases we've had in SOD, but I think it lacks that freshness, that new content, and I think that's why a lot of people have kind of opted out from playing SOD, and the number that was of players that has been there for Phase 1 will probably never be reached again in history of SOD or in the future of SOD, because it's just, it does not look feasible with the numbers of players that are playing right now. The game is not dead in any way whatsoever, but sadly, it's also probably going to be capping out very soon for the level 60 phases as well. So there's a couple of things about Phase 5 that I've noticed. So there's this streamer Zaryu that I was watching play SOD from the start, and he actually did not play Phase 5 up until this day on his stream because simply all of his friends said that the game's kind of dead. Also, a guild from Europe called None of the Above, Nota for short, which have gotten, I think, pretty much every single world first in SOD so far, just did not raid. They were supposedly missing players, but I also got some information that basically the interest was very low because all of them have done these exact raids in Season of Mastery, and there's like no need to go for world first again. And we saw how fast Blackwing Lair was actually cleared. I think it took him 2.5 hours for world first run. Yeah, of course, Molten Core was also really, really fast. Honestly, I think Sunken Temple was like considerably long, but that's because Sunken Temple was a new raid built from ground up, while both Molten Core and Blackwing Lair were copy-pastes from Season of Mastery. A lot of you guys have not played SOM because it was not that popular, but a lot of these changes were already implemented back then, and now they just brought it over, scaled the health up, and I think they just, yeah, that's actually all. They didn't really do anything, which is fine because, you're still limited to the whole, like, classic mentality and whatnot. While I think with Cataclysm, the problem is that we haven't had an update for God knows how long, And there is an update announced in the future, which is going to be Firelands. Probably going to be a very nice, time, a good raid for a couple of weeks, and it's going to probably die off. Again, I know that a lot of players are complaining about there not being any GDKPs or pugs currently in Cata because, you know, the player base has dropped by what, like 60% already. So I don't know like where rating is going in that sense either, because I'm not rating on Cata right now. Also, the next expansion for for Classic after Cataclysm would be MOP, and we very recently had MOP Remix. Obviously, it's a completely different thing, but I'm not 100% sure if Blizzard is planning on doing MOP or not, and I think that's something I want to talk about in this video as well. So retail right now is actually doing very well, and I think that both SOD and normal Classic seem to be struggling a little bit. Phase 4 and 5 were both undoubtedly amazing, better than any of the previous phases, but why are people not playing them? And I think that there are two reasons why. The first one is that there are barriers of entry that were introduced in later phases of Season of Discovery and are somewhat difficult for casual players to maybe just jump into the game and start playing with their friends. Obviously, there's a big leveling curve. A long amount of time is going to be spent leveling, getting the runes, and obviously, you know, reaching those gear requirements so they can enter the raid. You know, if you were to start right now in Phase 5, you would have a lot of chores to do to be able to, you know, start playing with your friends. Obviously, Blizzard has introduced a lot of, you know, mechanics in the recent update in Phase 5, thankfully, making things account-bound, making things a little bit easier to obtain, but I still don't think it's easy enough for a player to pick up the game and, you know, start playing it. The second issue, which is actually tied to the first one, is fragmented player base. There are so many versions of WoW. We have Classic, we have Retail, we have Hardcore, we have SOD, etc. Players are spread thin, and it's contributing to low populations on, you know, individual servers or versions of the game. And, you know, obviously having so many versions of the game, it's not just fragmenting the player base, it's also kind of splitting the player and how much time they have to play a specific game, right? So I am a streamer and a YouTuber, and I've been actually playing WoW like almost full time for a few months now. And I have actually not had the ability to play all of versions of the game as much as I wanted to, right? On Retail, I go and I push Mythic Plus, and, you know, I also was raiding Mythic for a while. I would hop on SOD, I would, you know, lead my raids, etc. I would almost always run out of time, because unless you had literally 24 hours to spend on the game, you would have to leave out certain parts of the game as non-completed, and, you know, not being optimized for a lot of people is not fun. I know that, you know, this optimization playstyle is kind of frowned upon in the, you know, in some parts of the World of Warcraft community, but I think for a lot of players like myself who are competitive, we like to not have, you know, we like to not have a negative, like the opposite of a head start, right? We want to be on, you know, on the same level as other players when it comes to competing in the end game, when it comes to raiding, you know, having the ability to do damage, the ability to do parse high, and to speed run and things like that, right? And obviously to clear bosses as fast as possible and get a high ranking on Warcraft logs progression. So I want to talk about a little bit about the population of SOD in Europe right now and why I think it's, you know, it is where it is. So currently the population of all SOD EU realms, it's currently still lower than the player base was in Phase 1 and Phase 2. Even with new raids like Blackwing, Lair, and Zul'Gurub, the current population on EU servers is still lower than in earlier Phases 1 and 2. I do think that mega servers were a good thing that they introduced. A lot of people, you know, are complaining about them because they can't have the reputation on the server and things like that. It can also mess up PvP balance. However, I do think that queues are a negative thing for the game, and we can't really, you know, debate about that. It's just a bad thing. Queues should not be there. But I do think that mega servers are the only way that, you know, WoW can have SOD and Classic and things like that, because it's just natural. You want to have the largest amount of players on a server so you can pick the best players out of those, or the most fitting for your specific activities or whatever you're doing, right? Obviously, there was a massive mistake with names and guild names in that it came with realm transfers, and also there was a huge lack of transparency from Blizzard. Like for example, my guild was talking about whether or not they want to go PvE or PvP. There were people already leaving the guild because at that time they just told us we're getting mega servers, but they did not tell us what our limitations are. And I myself, I was on Lone Wolf, which is a PvP server in Europe, and I wanted to go PvE. So there were people in my guild that were like, oh, you want to go PvE? Well, we are going to go PvP, so we're going to just find a new guild now already. I was like, okay, because at the time we did not know what's the situation, what it's going to be like. And then the actual transfers come out, and 2 days before that, we find out that basically, oh, all of the guild players that we lost were actually for no reason, because we are forced to go on the same type of the server that we were at before. So that was something that actually not only killed my guild, it also killed some guilds that my friends joined after. After they left my guild, they joined other guilds, and I actually was getting screenshots of DMs and announcements of massive guilds disbanding because of this specific reason. They were like, yeah, we lost so many of our core members because we were not, able to decide if we want to go PvE or PvP. Now Blizzard made a decision, an announcement that it's actually, they're all, you must stay on the same server, but the damage has already been done. So that's really sad. That really sucks. And I think, a lot of you listeners can also actually agree that maybe this caused some issues for you and your friend group or your guild as well. So obviously I want to talk about, more what Blizzard should do, what Blizzard should implement in Classic, right? And one of those things that they should implement is some sort of, retail mechanics, but obviously not all of them, right? We do not want retail minus, we want Classic plus. A lot of people are arguing that SOD is indeed retail minus. However, I do think that there was one thing that they did right and that people really enjoyed, and that is raid difficulties. Retail has a much clearer progression system of, between difficulties. You have LFR, normal, heroic, mythic, and, it's really, really obvious how much harder one is than the other. Molten Core sadly had one of the worst difficulty systems I've ever had, and it was the heat system. It was horrible. Blackwing Lair now has affixes, and they are a complete upgrade of what we had before. I don't think anybody is going to argue that affixes or, Dragonflight trials are in any way worse. But yeah, I think heat system was not the way to go at it. I don't know how this was not communicated and made sure that this kind of system does not enter an actual video game that is live with players. But I do think that this new affixes system they implement in Blackwing Lair is pretty good and rewards you with more loot for having these extra things going on in your raid. Obviously, crafting professions are also something that should be looked at a little bit better. In retail, crafting is a key part of your character's progression, but in SOD, professions are largely overlooked, and many players have expressed frustration over this because I think that a lot of profession gear can be skipped. In the past in SOD, profession gear was broken and you had to craft it, but the prices were really, really high. But in the later phases, the profession gear became less and less important, which I think also lost a lot of its touch and a lot of its importance. More classes should also have more race combinations in Classic Plus. I think that having the ability to play like Human Hunter is something that just fits into World of Warcraft. That was introduced in Cataclysm, and I think that's something that, having these kind of like race class customizations, combinations should actually make its way into Classic Plus as well. Another thing is I think that mounts are a key part of World of Warcraft, and they should be given to you faster because they, at least ground mounts, they just involve you in the world a little bit more. They make a lot of chores less tedious, and I don't think they have necessarily a bad impact on the game. They speed it up a little bit, they make the world feel a little bit smaller, but I don't think that's necessarily bad, and I think it respects your time a lot more. And I think that SOD or Classic Plus should have a more accessible mount, like acquisition, kinda. I also wanted to talk about the leveling process, because in SOD, we saw minor changes to leveling, with the XP boosts and, they added incursions, things like that, but it's still seen as a very tedious grind. There's still no LFG, which in my opinion, a lot of people hate the idea of queuing up. But if you were somebody who was playing SOD, you had to have an add-on that filtered chat because chat was going way too fast anyways. At that point, we might as well have a pre-made group finder, same as for Mythic Plus in retail, or maybe even the ability to queue up for easier difficulty dungeons that was introduced in Cataclysm. I don't mind either of those two. I think they respect the player's time. I think something like that should be in the game if we want to make it feel more modern, if we want to attract more players in the future. It is very hard to get new players interested in the game if we make, finding group a tedious chore that can be done through chat by spamming your, LFM or LFG sometimes for 20, 30 minutes at a time. And I don't think that makes the game any more enjoyable. I don't think it makes you fall in love with the character anymore. And I don't think it makes anyone a better player. 100% it does not make you a better player. So I think that this has to really be looked into if we want to have some sort of Classic Plus game coming in the future. I also want to talk about future expansions. Classic mob ? So the amount of hype that is going to get generated for each classic release is going to be lower and lower. This is the natural life cycle of business of an item that is, in the market. I think that splitting the community is a net bad thing. I think that having so many versions of the game that are starting to feel dead is just not good for anybody. I think that mega servers are the right thing, but I think that a lot more has to be done to make sure that, we go down the right route. I think that RuneScape has done a good job. A lot of RuneScape players that are my friend talk very well, in the way that they split up both OSRS and RS3. And, both of these two versions, are thriving in their own ways, and they both have a large amount of players. Those are only two versions. WoW right now has, I don't know how many versions. It's way too many. I think WoW Classic has a future, but it needs to strike a balance between new experiences and classic gameplay. I think Classic Plus could really bridge that gap, in many ways. Taking the best aspects of retail, like quality of life improvements and customization, and, taking all of that and maintaining the original game's core. Maybe keeping it at level 60, keeping like the original Azeroth, without all of those additional islands could be a really good way. And then, maybe they could implement more and more raids into the old world as we knew it at level 60, or, whichever version of the game they decide to go with. I don't really mind. But I do think that Classic Plus has an insane amount of future and possibilities that could make the game enjoyable. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this video. This was a very messy discussion video from my side. I've been thinking about this and writing down notes for such a long time, and I could not get it organized, or as organized as I thought I originally will, but I still wanted to deliver this video for you guys. So thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you around. Peace out.